Welcome back to another session here with your boy D365 Unplugged. Today we're going to talk about safety stock in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. What is it? How to use it? Manual safety stock, automatically calculated safety stock, and what are the use cases? So first off, why would we want to use safety stock? Really depends on your industry. What are your inventory needs? Do you need that buffer of inventory to account for long lead time product or the ability to get orders out same day? There's lots of ways to achieve this. We touched upon it in the last session when we looked at our coverage groups. We talked about things like our min-max coverage groups and having a minimum inventory level and a maximum inventory level. And today we're going to get a lot more specific into what types of safety stock and min-max levels we can have. So let's get this started. So I'm going to navigate to my release products. We're going to continue using that great beer that we've all really been dying to have, which is Drew's Gray IPA. And continuing on with the example we have, we'll go over to our Plan Action Ribbon tab and we'll bring up the item coverage. Here we can see that currently we have a min-max setting. We have a min-max coverage code, 100 is our minimum, 750 is our maximum. What does that actually mean? It means when inventory is projected to fall below 100 units, it's going to project to get us back to 750 units. If I was using a different coverage group, a coverage group that's not min-max, I could apply a min and have no max. So let's go back to like a requirement-based coverage group, for example, and click Save. Here you can see my maximum is gone. I don't even have the ability to select it. So what does that mean? It means that if inventory falls below 100 units, I'm going to get a planned order to supply and get back to 100 units. That's my optimum inventory level. I don't have this 2-level setting. I don't really have that concept of a true reorder point in comparison to my minimum level of inventory or my safety stock. I just have that one level. The other thing that's important to note is other ERP systems out there treat safety stock like an unallocatable inventory. When you fall below that safety stock level in some other systems, you cannot use this inventory unless you release it to the demand. D365 and Dynamics AX does not do that. It is purely for planning purposes. This inventory is as usable as any other on-hand inventory we have. It's not hard reserved. So that's truly important to remember when you are planning. So I have 100 units as my safety stock. Let's take a look as to what happens. I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to write off all of my inventory that I have in stock currently. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to reduce this 90 liters of the Gray IPA down to 0. That's going to take a minute here. I'm doing a quantity adjustment. We now see there is no physical inventory available, but I got lots on order. I still have lots of demand. So what does that mean from a planning aspect if I go to my net requirements? We're going to choose our static plan that we've been working with in the previous demo, and we're going to rerun master planning. And you can see for warehouse 24, I have my minimum of 100. I don't have a maximum because we're not using a min-max coverage group. And if we look at our entire supply plan, we want to end up at that 100 units of inventory. So we're always having planned batch orders as soon as we fall below to get us to that level. If I scroll higher up into my demand plan, I have this 100 units in an actual scheduled production batch. That is fulfilling my immediate sales order, but you can also see it's currently pegged to safety stock. And that safety stock is showing today's date. It's showing February 8th. That might seem a little bit odd. I potentially have a lead time for this item, right? I just fell below my minimum inventory level today because we saw I reduced my quantity from 90 to 0. Maybe that was because of bad inventory. Maybe that was because we had some sort of obsolescence, a quality control issue, somebody needed to check that out to engineering, whatever it may be. Maybe I sold it. Well, fact of the matter is I probably can't actually fulfill that minimum today. So why am I getting a date to supply it immediately based on the fact that it just fell below inventory? That actually comes in from our item coverage, a very commonly overlooked area. So we looked at our item coverage. I had a minimum of 100 units, but under my general tab, the default order setting or the default setting for fulfilling that minimum is actually today's date, meaning our safety stock needs to be replenished as soon as possible. In a lot of cases, that is not realistic and it's not the option you want to choose. Typically, you want to take your lead time into consideration because you're probably having a safety stock level that's equivalent to last you the average demand over your lead time. So today's date plus procurement time is a better option for the majority of companies when it comes to fulfill minimum. I'm going to set that here on my item coverage, and I'm going to go back into my static plan, rerun planning one more time, and we're going to see what that actually looks like and how that reflects in our plan. Looks like I actually picked the wrong plan there. We're going to go back to our static plan. I'll go update, master planning, and we'll take a look at what happens with warehouse 24. So now I have this production order out here for 100 units. We'll take a look at the pegging. Still pegged to our safety stock, but you see the requirement date is no longer 2/8. It's now 2/15. Why is that? I look at my item coverage. There we go. I have a 7-day lead time on production. 2/8, 7 days. 2/15 is now when I can expect for my safety stock to be back into inventory. Now you're probably asking, well, that seems kind of broad, kind of simplistic. Right now, I am using a default lead time for this item. I'm not using production routing or what we would normally use in a manufacturing environment. So if we look at my manage inventory default order settings, that's where my lead time is coming from. Under inventory, we have an inventory lead time. One thing that's also commonly misunderstood is they see inventory. People often think this is just for things like transfer orders between warehouses. This can actually serve as your production lead time if you're not using production routings, or in a lean system, you're not using all the different variations you have to set up your lean Kanbans and your lean schedule board. So this is basically a very simplistic view of a production lead time using the inventory lead time settings in your default order settings. Alternatively, if I had a routing underneath the engineer tab set up for this item that had operations and their actual run times at individual machines or work cell resources, that could be used to determine the lead time as well. So we've covered two things so far. We've covered one, what does that minimum inventory level or safety stock actually mean? And two, what is the basis for that date? And I showed fulfill minimum by today's date, early as possible, and by today's date plus procurement time. But if we go back to item coverage, we click on our general tab and click that fulfill minimum, you can see there's two other options. There's first issue and coverage time fence. So first issue is kind of similar to today's date plus procurement time, but it's actually gonna wait essentially until you get that extra demand. You might be projected to fall below your minimum now, but until you get another source of demand, it's not gonna project to get you back to that inventory level. It really wants to see that you're cutting into that safety stock before it projects that you should get additional inventory. The coverage time fence, probably the option that I see used the least. That is going to push fulfilling your safety stock all the way out till the end of the coverage time fence, till the end of your planning horizon. There's very few cases where that's going to work for most manufacturing or distribution companies because it's pushing that safety stock level to the very, very end, in which case we could argue, do you even need a safety stock? But now that I've changed it to the first issue, let's look at what happens to our safety stock date. So now we have it and it's showing 3/10, and that is because our first issue after we cut into the safety stock is a sales order for March 10th. So our safety stock won't actually be replenished until March 10th instead of today's date or instead of the 7-day lead time. So those are the differences between your fulfill minimum buy. So now we're really getting to the heart of things, right? We've seen what needs to happen to fulfill our minimum and when that minimum can be fulfilled. But I've really been focusing on a very static number that I've manually input here in the item coverage rule. So you're probably wondering, what are ways where we can come up with a safety stock that actually is meaningful? I put this number in manually. I could even change it manually right here, rerun planning again, and then see the effects of that. I can go one step further by going to the General tab and using something like a minimum or maximum key. Now you can see I don't have any options here, but if I click View Details, I can create a minimum or maximum key. This is something that's used commonly for seasonality. Let's say you work in an industry that's very prone to seasonality. Maybe you're in retail, right? And the seasonality of an item goes up or down based on holidays. You want to hold a higher buffer level, a higher safety stock when holidays come around versus maybe other times of the year. I'm from the Northeast. Companies like EMS or Eddie Bauer, they're going to stock those puffer jackets very much this time of year, right? They're going to have a lot of inventory stocked of that warm clothing that'll keep you warm when the snow's coming down. So what do you want to do with a min-max key? You can actually have the system automatically update the safety stock based on a percentage of that time of year. So let's say this is going to be called the seasonality key. We'll just call it seasonal since it looks like I'm breaking my threshold for characters there. And we'll call it our seasonal reduction key, or min-max key is probably a better term. We're going to make it effective at the start of the year. And every month we're going to edit it by a factor. So that factor is a percentage. That's a percentage times the level specified in our minimum field. So maybe in January for this Drew's Brews IPA, we get a lot of demand, right? Beginning of the year, people are happy, they're excited. Maybe it's dry January. I don't know. Actually, let's take that view of things. Maybe it's dry January and a lot of people don't want to drink. They're giving up the beer, so we see less demand. We're going to say this is a factor of 8%. Then we're going to go in and we're going to say 1 month later, it jumps up a little bit, 25. Jumps up again in March. And actually in March, it gets back to its normal demand, okay? So 1 times the safety stock setting. And then we get in April. It's starting to get warm. People are excited. They're drinking beer. We're going to jump up to more than 200 units that we currently have in our minimum inventory level, and so on. So get into May, even more, July, all that great stuff, and so on. Then I'm going to say, what's the change? So I'm going to put in some dates here, right? So actually, I put 1/1. Let's edit this. Let's make it each month. So January 1st to January 31st, we're at 20% of the minimum inventory level. We get to February, we're at 25% of a minimum inventory level. March, we're at our minimum inventory level. April and May, we go above that static quantity. So you see these different units here. I'll go back to my previous screen. Our minimum is currently 200. Those factors are multiplied by this amount to come up with a safety stock for that date. So I'm going to apply that minimum key. I'm going to click Save. Then we're going to go to this min-max tab. This is going to show us what the projected minimum or safety stock level will be based on that key in each month. So 20% of our minimum inventory level in January is only 40 liters, 40 units. February 50. We get to March, it's static, it's at that inventory level. April, it's at 240. May, it jumps up to 300. We're getting to July, it's probably jumping off more. People are drinking, people are having a great time. So when those dates hit the calendar and master planning runs, you're going to see that reflected. What's commonly missed when you use those keys is this minimum right here is always going to show the actual minimum. the minimum specified in the item coverage. It's not going to show what is the minimum with the factor based on your min-max key. That's really, really important. So if I were to look here, I see my safety stock, 200 units on March 10th, because we're in the March date now with our first issue. If I go back once again, I go into my item coverage, I change that general, I change it back to today's date and click save, meaning I need to fulfill my minimum today, and my minimum is a percentage of 200, and I rerun that static plan, I'm going to see that that's going to change. So my minimum still shows 200, but if I look at my pegging and I look at what's needed for safety stock, it's only the 50 units. It's that percentage of my safety stock. So really important for planners, buyers, production people to know that that min-max key can affect that plan. If you're going to use min-max keys, communicate to that business. The net requirement screen is not going to show in the minimum field that there's a min-max key applied that could be offsetting your safety stock. So really, really important. Next question you're probably asking, what if I don't want to manually input this number? I want it to actually be auto-calculated based on the demands that we're seeing in our supply chain. Great question, and D365 has an answer for that. So let's go to our master planning module. Something that still to this day, it's been around since as long as I've been using Dynamics, which is since AX 3.0, might have come out in AX 4.0, which I transitioned to a few months after I got into this career. And if we go to inquiries and reports, actually, sorry, not even under inquiries and reports, we're going to go and we're going to look for a journal. It's called the safety stock journal. So we'll look at run and we see something called the safety stock calculation. Safety stock calculation uses a journal of type safety stock. Looks like in my demo system we don't have one. Let's go ahead and create one. We'll just give it a very straightforward name, safety stock. It's going to be for safety stock calculations. All the prerequisite setup we need. It's of journal type safety stock. We give it a name. Could be whatever name you want. I just kept it simple. This safety stock calculation journal serves really two purposes. One is, as you saw, I was updating my item coverage manually. What happens if I need to update item coverage for tens of items, hundreds of items, thousands of items? I don't want to go through the IT department and do some sort of mass data migration. The safety stock journal can help me auto-populate a safety stock or minimum inventory level for all of those items at one time. First advantage, safety stock check. Second advantage, this can actually calculate what your safety stock should be based on historical data. Advantage number two. Caveat, unlike things like Kanbans, the safety stock journal cannot use projected or future demand. Can't use those open sales orders that are on future dates, doesn't use forecasts. Kanban calculations do things like that. Demand forecasting can use future dated demand. Safety stock is purely based on historical data, but still a huge step in the right direction. So how do we actually do that? Number one is you create this journal. Number two, we click create lines. Create lines is going to give us a couple options. One is, what is the from date for the historical data we want to consider? You can see this is defaulting to the same month in the previous year. That date I can change to a different month. Maybe I only want to consider the previous 6 months demand and I want to change that. And then what is the to date? Is it last month? Is it the end of last year? Do I want to use a full year? Let's go ahead and actually use a full year's worth of transactions to calculate our safety stock. Second step I want to do is I would almost always recommend you click the calculate standard deviation button. The reason being, in a later step in this process, you can only use one of the options if this is checked. You can use both options if this is checked. If you don't check it, you are limited in your options. So I would always recommend clicking your calculate standard deviation option. Then we can go ahead and we can filter. Maybe your items are split up by planner, by geography, by SKU, whatever it may be. You're probably not going to calculate a safety stock for every item in your entire catalog. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say only give me item numbers that start with D. We know Drew's Brews IPA is in there. There's a couple items in our Contosa database for USMF that are also in there. And then I'm going to click OK. This is going to go out. It's going to get that filter and it's going to show me what items match that filter. And just to make it a little bit easier, since I don't have configured items, I'm going to turn off my product dimensions and a tracking dimension. I only want to see my site and warehouse. I only plan at the site and warehouse level. What is this going to show me right away? One, it's going to show the items that matched my criteria. Two, it's going to show me what are their current minimum inventory levels. We can see for Drew's Gray IPA, we have our 200 units. A couple other items in there also have a current minimum. So this is telling me current state. Now what I want to do is I want to calculate what I think the safety stock should be. What should be my new minimum inventory level? So I'm going to click Calculate Proposal. And here's where the previous step of me telling you, always click the Calculate Standard Deviation button comes in. If I didn't click that button, the only option I would have is use the average issues. Essentially, what is the average demand during the lead time? So using the example of Drew's Gray IPA, my lead time is 7 days. If you don't have a lead time specified on your item, it will not calculate a safety stock or minimum inventory level. So important point right there. If you do, you can use this option to say, what's that average demand over the 7 days and give me a calculated safety stock that should last me 7 days worth of demand. When I do that, I can put in a multiplication factor. Maybe I want a little bit of buffer. I want the demand times 1.5. And maybe I want to go one step further. My lead time might be 7 days. Treat it like 8 days. Or actually, sorry, with a lead time margin of 8, it would be 15 days. If I put in 1 for that example of Drew's Gray IPA, it would be 8 days. And I can say use the calculated minimum quantity as the new minimum, meaning once you do your calculation and I click OK, automatically populate my new minimum inventory quantity field. So you can see that I got 0 on all of these. Well, why is that? If I click an individual item and I click this line details, it's going to tell me, well, cost price is 50, my current inventory value is 10,000. I don't have any average issues of any of these items over that time frame. And actually, if I go up here to other items, maybe I'm seeing some, right? So maybe I'm seeing that average issues per month is 3.08, but that item didn't have a lead time. So step number 1, I told you need to have a lead time to get a minimum proposal. Some of these items, a lot of these items don't have a lead time, or if they do, their lead time is so small that it's not getting a safety stock because the average demand is so small. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go back to Drew's Gray IPA. And we're going to go ahead, actually, before we do that, we're going to change the system date into the past. We're going to trick the system a little bit. We're going to say it's October of 2021. Then we're going to go to Drew's Gray IPA, and we're going to sell an item in October of 2021. So we got a sales order or a bunch of sales orders out there. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to ship it back in the past. We got our DeLorean. We decided to ship this item back into the past, right? So remember, we journaled out all our inventory. So since we're in a demo and we can kind of do whatever we want, we're going to adjust inventory. We're going to say we had that inventory and we're going to sell it in the past. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to do a quantity adjustment. I have a batch number that's out there. Great. I can put this in a location. Even better. And I'm going to go ahead and put 500 units in stock. Go ahead and click OK. 500 units in stock. We're still back in October. We look at our calendar. So step number 1 achieved. We're going to go back to our release products. We're going to find the item that begins with Drew. And we're going to look at our open sales order lines. We're going to go ahead and ship against that sales order that's out there. So we have demand in the past. So once we go back into our safety stock calculation, we can see some of that. So I'm going to skip what normally happens where, we're going through warehouse processes because this is an MRP session. We're just going to cheat the system a little bit here. So we're going to say parameters, I'm going to say select all lines. Let's get rid of a couple of these. So we're left with 400 units of demand. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick these, right? We got 500 units in stock. Let's go ahead and pick for these 400 units that are there. So I'm going to add my picking line. Select my batch number that's on hand. What location is my inventory in? There it is. Great. And we're going to confirm pick. Do the same thing on my top line. I'm going to update line. And we'll click happy. We get to the pick screen. We add that picking line. Select our batch on hand, our location on hand, and we pick that line as well. So we've now picked 400 liters of Drew's Gray IPA. It knows what batch, knows what location. We can go ahead and post our packing slip. We've now shipped those units. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change that date back to our current state. So it's 2/8, right? Change that session date back to 2/8. We're going to go to our safety stock calculation. We have an open journal. We're going to click calculate proposal. Leave the settings as they are. Go ahead and click OK. Drew's Gray IPA. What do we have? Currently, we're not showing anything over those 7 days. So what happened there? Let's go ahead and delete these journal lines. Let's rerun them now with the new data. We want it from 2/1 to 1/31. We're going to say OK, great. Click on that one. What do we see? So right away, even before I've calculated proposal, it's saying what our demand was per month. So 33.33 liters per month for Drew's Gray IPA. And if you average that out over the lead time of 7 days, that's just under 8 liters per month, 7.78. So we're already seeing that just by adding the lines to the journal. Now I'm going to calculate proposal. I'm going to click OK. And we can see that it's proposing a safety stock of 13.33 liters based on that. Our current inventory level is at 200 liters. So I did this very haphazardly, just threw it in order, very small amounts, and it's telling me that I need to reduce my safety stock quite a bit. But you can see already the effects that that's having, the things it can take under consideration. So it's telling me what my average issue is per month, what my average issue or demand is per the lead time of that item. So that's the very basic proposal, which is your average issues over the lead time. You can put in a factor, you can put in a lead time margin. Now, what is the service level? Why did I need to click that calculate standard deviation button? The service level is based on the percentage of time that we don't want the inventory to be stocked out. I would say 50%, ignore it. If you choose 50%, you're likely or almost always going to get a minimum inventory level of 0. These other options are more realistic. What is the percentage of time we want to avoid stock out? Absolute 0 of this item. And you need to toggle between these to see what is your optimum level of inventory for that item. So I'm going to say 80% of the time I want to avoid stock out for Drew's Gray IPA. Now go ahead and calculate that safety stock. My minimum inventory level immediately jumps up to almost 48 liters. I only have demand over my lead time of 7 days at 8 liters. But if I want to avoid stock out 80% of the time, I need to hold 48 liters in stock. You can also see that these two columns are the same. The new minimum quantity, calculate minimum quantity. And that is because when I did calculate proposal, I checked the box, use calculated minimum quantity as the new minimum quantity. Other advantage here is I don't need to delete these lines, recreate the journal, and choose another option. I can say, okay, show me what it means for a 95% service level. Now I'm jumping up to almost 95 liters, much more. And I can see what that impact will be on the cost. Inventory level or inventory value even of my minimum inventory level. Right now it's $10,000 for the 200 liters based on a cost price of 50. If I put that down to 94.20 liters, that's going to go down to $4,700, a reduction of almost $5,300. So I can automatically calculate this now based on historical data. And as soon as I have that new minimum quantity set to the levels I want, whether I manually put those in or let the system calculate them, and even if I let the system calculate them, you can see I can edit those because maybe I want to round this up to 100 units. As soon as I have all of these items at the level I want, I can post this journal. And that's where the next level of magic comes in. I'm going to go ahead and click post. Looks like I'm getting an issue. Let's see what my issue is. The maximum must be greater than the minimum on line 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I must have here an item that has a min max. I put in a minimum of 1,000 and that item has a maximum. What the safety stock journal does not do is calculate a maximum. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove that item that I had actually put in 1,000 units for, and we'll post one more time. Now it's been posted. What's going to happen is anything that was in this new minimum quantity column is now the new item coverage, the new minimum inventory level for those items. So let's go to Drew's Gray IPA. And let's open that item coverage form. We now see my minimum is 100 units, reflected by the fact that I posted that safety stock journal. So as you can see, I can manually edit and put in safety stocks. I can automatically calculate safety stocks based on historical data. I can use the system to tell me when I should fulfill that safety stock by based on what I want in my organization as soon as possible, considering the lead time, considering when demand kicks in, or pushing it out to my planning horizon. And I can even use minimum and maximum keys to account for things like seasonality. Lots of tools available. This has been in Dynamics for a long, long time, and I really think you can take advantage of it in your planning teams. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you on our next D365 MRP Unplugged session.